Do 1, 2, 3, 4.
So which of Shakespeare's plays are you familiar with?
I've read a couple Shakespeare plays, Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, King John, Midsummer Night's Dream, so a few, and a lot of his sonnets as well.
I have read Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, and Richard III.
I'm pretty familiar with most of them. I did theater in high school and we did a lot of them.
I'm familiar with Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet. I think those are the two most ones that I know.
I know Macbeth, A Midsummer Night's Dream, and Romeo and Juliet.
Hamlet, Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, Comedy of Errors,
Don't know that one.
Tempest, Much Ado About Nothing, Othello.
Don't really know that one that well.
Midsummer Night's Dream.
Taming of the Shrew.
And which one's your favorite, if you have one?
Hamlet's definitely my favorite. Yeah.
And why would that be?
Good plot development, and I guess I really liked a lot of the characters. They could translate pretty well to normal life today.
My favorite was Hamlet because I read it in my high school class and I had a really good teacher who taught it, and so I understood it more than the other two.
A Midsummer Night's Dream was cool. I think Macbeth was the one we studied most thoroughly, so I knew the most about that one, so that was interesting as well.
Probably Romeo and Juliet.
And why?
Just because there's a lot of intricate metaphors and stuff that they use within it, which is, I guess, evident in all his work, but for that part, I would say that it was most enjoyable for me.
I'd really have to say I don't have much of a favorite. Probably Midsummer Night's Dream, though, if I did have to choose one. I think the mythical aspect and that part is a lot more interesting than just citing stuff about kings and things.
Taming of the Shrew.
Why?
Because of its absurdity, and it's I don't know, I did a monologue from one of the characters in it, and it was pretty great. Liked it. It was well written. Shakespeare.
Probably Macbeth or Hamlet
Why?
because it has a lot of death.
And which one's your least favorite?
Hamlet.
Why?
Just because it doesn't work out for him whatsoever.
I mean, I didn't particularly dislike any of them, but Romeo and Juliet is the one I like the least, I guess. It's just not as exciting for me, maybe.
Richard III, because he's a mean character.
King John is definitely my least favorite. It was very, very dry and long and boring.
Romeo and Juliet.
I agree.
Why?
Seen it too many times. Read it
I don't
too many
know.
times.
I think it's overdone, right? I think that's my answer.
Did you study Shakespeare in high school?
I did. I took British literature, and we did a lot of Shakespeare. We did Beowulf, a bunch of other stuff as well, but we did some Shakespeare.
Yeah, because she's doing a young.
And did you enjoy studying Shakespeare in high school?
Yes.
Yeah. I think so.
I did enjoy it.
Not at all. I'm actually, even though I've read, well versed in Shakespeare, I'm really not a huge fan, and it was very hard to read through and get through and kind of, decode everything he had to say. So it was very difficult, I think, and not one of my more favorite parts of Ivy Lit and things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a little hard to study because it's antiquated, so it's hard to bring all the lessons and everything into modern day stuff, but it was good.
Not as much as I would have now, I would say.
Not even a little bit.
And what reaction would you have now if a professor told you that you had to study Shakespeare?
I'd probably want to study Shakespeare, but the creative realms of how he manipulates words or how he uses the word choice.
We actually did.
I also
It was
took
great.
a Shakespeare and film FSEM, so
It was great. I had a
it was
great
pretty
time.
good. Yeah, I liked it. It was nice. Talking to two theater majors, so.
I'd be down with it.
I think it'd be okay if it was a good professor.
I would not be excited, just because of how dense a lot of the material and a lot of the studies on him are.
I would not be pleased, if we're being quite honest. It just, like I said, I'm not the biggest Shakespeare fan, so I wouldn't, find that enjoyable.
And do you think studying Shakespeare should be required in middle school, high school, or college?
Yeah, well, if you do it right, yeah. In middle school, we studied a sort of an abridged version, or I think it's just if the teacher presents it correctly, then you can start whenever. You can start as young as elementary school, but it should be presented in the right way. It shouldn't be presented as this boring old book.
I think it should be brushed over because he's an important figure in literature, but I don't think it necessarily has to be deeply studied.
And I don't think it should be required at all, because as soon as something becomes required, then people tend to not like it as much. I would say that it should be a choice in high school and a choice in college.
I think definitely in high school, I think it's good to have, he's definitely a big name in literature, and it's definitely good to see his work, read his work, learn and understand the iambic pent. But college, I definitely think, he have it as a choice, have it as definitely a viable option. But I also think middle school is too early. It's definitely hard to read and hard to get through and hard to understand, just because the language is so different. So high school, college.
I think it would be okay in high school and college, but probably not middle school, because Shakespeare is a really hard person to understand and his work is very difficult. So I think you have to be at a level of maturity to really understand him.
Yes.
No.
Okay, go
No
for
to
it.
any?
I don't know. I don't think it should be necessarily required in all of them. I think maybe to get a basis of it, because it's such a huge part of history and whatnot. Maybe in high school, to have a class on that. I think maybe, yeah, that's probably useful, but I don't think it's needed to be enforced throughout all of that span of time.
I think you should have to learn about it sometime, because it's classic literature that affects, and you can see connections to that in all the stuff that's
But I think
popular today.
there's too much emphasis on Shakespeare as opposed to other classic literature.
Like what?
I don't know. You ever hear about Marlowe? Not much.
I don't even know who that is.
Well, that's sad. See what I'm saying? There we go.
I don't think you know who that is.
He was said to be Shakespeare.
Cool. What's one play he wrote?
I don't know. That doesn't matter.
Okay.
And what benefits are there for studying Shakespeare?
I mean, Shakespeare invented a lot of words that we use today, so
Truth.
Like what?
there's a lot of value for.
Yeah, like what?
I can't think of any of the words he invented, but it's really easy to
I couldn't
pull
think
up
of
a
any of
list.
Christopher Marlowe's plays, but
Well,
that's not my fault.
It's because they're words we use every day.
A lot of the stuff he talks about is modern day stuff. I think it's just a lot of people have trouble getting past how old it is and the stigma behind it. Oh, I have to study Shakespeare. I think if you can get past that, it's really interesting.
The material itself is pretty enlightening, I guess, because it's comes from a different time and a different kind of whole thought process back in the day. So I think you can definitely learn something from it, but not as much as people push for you to.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know what exactly you would learn, but I think that it's important to have a wide variety of knowledge, and Shakespeare is one of the most important literary figures of our time, and I think that everyone should know a little bit about him.
beneficial. I'd say a benefit of studying Shakespeare would, getting a different view of different types of literature and, something that is not around anymore, the way they talked in those, Elizabethan era, that is definitely something that should be seen, so it's beneficial to learn about that and understand that literature has come a long way since then.
Well, I would learn how to manipulate words and kind of use them to my advantage. So.
Those themes are really common. You can see
Very
lots
common. I agree with that.
a lot of books and media.
And it's super, like, it expands on, like, all the dynamics of those.
No time, no place to go. The tracks will lead us by. Drop by the ocean road. Get to the other side. And amongst the blue and green, the days go drifting by.
Those, what was I trying to say?
I don't know.
Me either.